In our current project, the small wall cupboard, Rebates are our main joinery. Now in the video I used a pretty snazzy and expensive fillister plane to cut all these joints. So in this video I wanted to show you a few alternatives that will be using more basic and common tools. I'm not showing the ideal or textbook approach here, but it's a very can-do take on cutting rebates. We're using little more than some basic marking tools and a chisel. You might use this method because you're new to hand tool work and want to get a feel for things before splashing out, or otherwise it's just a very good back to basics way of working. So I've got my two pieces here I want to join, and I'll start with putting the piece I want the rebate in just down on the bench and slide the other piece up to it. And just use a little chisel to describe a little line in it. I don't know if you can see that, but we've just got a little mark now that we can slide a square up to and sit a knife in and score a line. So just take some progressively deeper sort of strikes. There we go. Now a bench hook does help here. If you just hook your piece up, and we'll just chisel in a little valley, just with hand pressure. Just flip them off. So you can see there we've created now a little trough to sit the chisel in. Well, the next step now is we want to mark a depth. So I've got a marking gauge, and I'll just set that to about 1/4 inch. We'll go all the way around. Now sit it on the bench and just stick your chisel in that trough and give it a light clump. That trough stops the chisel sort of sliding back past your line. We've got a new bench hook again, and this time we can take a bigger chunk away. We're hogging most of it out now. I think one more clump and we'll be there. Of course you could always use a tenon saw to cut this shoulder line, but I'll go into more detail about why I prefer to use the chisel in a future video we have planned on this very subject. Just about there. Get rid of that. I'm going to dump it vertically in a vise. And what we're going to do now is split this waste off. We're not going to saw it. Sawing's labour intensive. But just like a hot bath, you're not going to jump straight into it. So instead, rather than setting the chisel on the line, we'll just come ahead of it and test it. That's split pretty straight. Test the other side as well. So that works. We'll take all that out. And now we'll come to the line. We want to try and aid the chisel to split down the line this time. Just take light taps and guide it. Same on the other end. And then just work your way down it. If your test splits run towards the marked line, then be sure to continue by sitting the chisel ahead of the line, so not to split into it. Let's get rid of the 1/5 where we haven't cut deep enough. Then we can just come in and pare down vertically. My grain split down slightly away from my gauge line, so I'm paring here to make the wall vertical and remove the extra waste. If my grain ran the opposite way and my waste had been left at the top, then I would pare across the grain rather than down it. Just a little look, see how we're doing. And that's it. As quick as that, we've now got a perfect rebate. So we did that just with a chisel. Now if you're going to struggle to split this vertically and get this flat, if we had gaps showing, we can put them over it with one of these shoulder planes. These are very inexpensive and I would say pretty essential. We can just run a few passes across there and that'll flatten it off. I've just knocked in a couple of tacks to hold the joint together, and it certainly isn't looking too bad for such a basic approach. So we're going to have to take a different approach when cutting a rebate along the grain. Now I've got a nice longish piece here. This is the same length as the sides on the little wall cupboard we've just built, so I'm not cheating. And what we'll do is we'll just run a rebate down the edge of it. Now if we're using a fillister plane, we'll just set the fence, we'd set a depth stop and we'd be away. But as we're doing this freehand, we are going to have to give ourselves some marks. So if I remember correctly, I think it was about 1/2 inch wide. I'll just set a marking gauge to that. Now you want this to be a nice deep line. As deep as the gauge will let you go. And I think it was about 1/4 inch deep. Not too worried about this being a big deep line because this is just to monitor our progress as we go. We've got our lines, so what we want to do is create that little trough that we did before. So all we'll do, we have to be careful here, is run the chisel on its edge into the line. And that's why we wanted that line to be fairly deep. Right, once you're happy with that, I mean that is very shallow at the minute, we'll run a chisel along it. Just want to use very light pressure because it will wunder. Come back over now, some heavier pressure. And we'll just deepen that trough. Much easier now, I don't have to be as careful because we've got a good deep line to go to. Don't know that I'm going against the grain here. Just re-establish it, get all them whiskey bits off. Now what we'll do, to get rid of the majority of this waste, we'll just chop away at it. So, you could dog this down to your bench, but it just works to get it to stop. Pretty much going to the line in a passage. Wash them off. If the skin on your thumb isn't like a horse's hoof, then you might want to use something else. Right, so that'll do for now. So I haven't gone to the line. I'm just quite roughly actually, but I'm about, what am I, barely a 1/16 I would say. So now what I'll do is dog it down to the bench. just use one of these shoulder planes. Now, there's nothing fancy about that. Very inexpensive. Well, it's pretty much a fillister plane, but without the fences. Now we can just run that into our wall. Just check on our progress. There's always one more after you, one. Then we'll just run the shoulder plane on its side and it'll just clean the wall up. And there we go. So it's as good as a fillister plane really, just it didn't take much longer. You just don't have the guidance that comes with fences. The rebate is, without a doubt, one of the most basic forms of joinery. And there's certainly a lot of specialist tools available, and always have been, for cutting joints such as these. But it's nice to know they can be done just as well with a very basic toolkit, just a chisel and a hammer. Anyway, as always, we really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we'll see you again next time. We'll be back next time with part 2 of our wall cupboard. If you've yet to see the beginning of this build, then you can take a look on our YouTube channel, or alternatively pop over to our blog, theenglishwoodworker.com. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe.